We'll now have some further readings from the Word of the Lord, starting with a reading from chapter 21 of the book of Revelation, right near the end. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God." Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls filled with the seven last plagues came to me and talked with me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. Our next readings are from the Heavenly Doctrines of the New Church, portions of the book called Heaven and Hell. And we read, "The entire heaven as one whole resembles one human being. That heaven in its complex represents one human being is a secret not yet known in the world, but it is very well known in the heavens. To know this and the specific and particular things relating to it is the chief thing of the intelligence of the angels there. Indeed, on it many things depend, which without it as their general principle would not enter distinctly and clearly into the ideas of the angels' minds. Since they know that all the heavens with their societies resemble one human being, they therefore call heaven the grand and divine human. Divine because it is the divine of the Lord that makes heaven. Such being the form of heaven, it is ruled by the Lord as one person, thus as a unit. For although a person, as is well known, consists of an innumerable variety of things, not only as a whole, but also in each part, as a whole of members, organs, and viscera, and in each part of fibers, nerves, and blood vessels, thus of members within members and parts within parts, yet the person, when he acts as one. Such then is heaven under the oversight and leadership of the Lord. Amen. The appearance of the Lord's bride at the end of the book of Revelation can be a little puzzling. Who or what is able to be the Lord's bride? Clearly, no individual human being is the counterpart to God, and nor would the Lord pick one woman out of the billions who have lived to be his one and only. He doesn't have favorites. So this bride has to represent something more than a single woman. She has to represent some sort of a collective, some sort of a greater whole made up of many human beings. It's been pretty common through history to use an individual as a symbol for a group. And the Christian church, right from the beginning, has taught that the church is like a single human body. Paul wrote, "By one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made to drink into one Spirit." It's virtually always been understood that the church is like a single human body. Out of many parts, it forms a single whole. And it's not hard to see that that composite whole is what the bride of the Lord represents. And this is confirmed in the teachings of the new church. We read, in the highest sense, a bride means the Lord's church in respect to divine truth from the Lord. It's lovely to think of the Lord's church as it exists throughout the world, in every good person's heart, being united this way. To think of the church acting as one, the way that a human body acts as a unit. The idea that I want to focus on today is that this image is actually much more than an image, much more than just a metaphor. In a very real way, heaven and the church are one coherent human being. That means that the Lord is urging and inviting all of us to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and not in a vague or a symbolic way. He's inviting us to become an integral part of a bigger body. He's inviting us to become one, or to act as one with countless other human beings. That reading from Heaven and Hell said that heaven is called the grand human. In the original Latin of heaven and hell, that phrase is maximus homo, which literally just means the biggest person, or the human being on the grandest scale. And the point is that heaven is in the human form, right down to the tiniest details. Just like our bodies are made up of a lot of different parts, heaven is made up of communities of angels, and each of those communities serves as one of the limbs or the organs of the grand human. And just like each part of our bodies is made up of smaller parts and finally of cells, every community in the grand human is made up of smaller communities and finally of individual people. So what we become, if we choose to be a part of heaven, is a cell in the grand human. We become one of the tiny fundamental building blocks of that beautiful whole. That idea is discussed a lot in the teachings of the new church, and many of you may have heard it before, but it's easy to hold it as little more than an illustration. It's less easy to hold that idea as a literal truth. But the truth is that the grand human is just as alive and as coherent and as human as we are. The reading from Heaven and Hell said that a person, when he acts, does so as one. Such is heaven under the oversight and leadership of the Lord. And the reading also said that heaven is ruled by the Lord as one person, thus as a unit. Think of the implications of this. We all know that we're part of things that are bigger than we are. We belong to families and to countries and to the human race. And we know that those bigger things are more important than we are. And at the same time, all of us have this tendency to be totally self-referential in our thinking, which means that when we think about the Lord and His providence, we have a tendency to think that He's shaping His plans around us as individuals. And even when we're wise enough to at least admit that we're not the center of the universe, we still tend to think that it's individuals that He's building around. And He is. The Lord absolutely does care about every one of us as individuals, which is a point that I'll come back to in a moment. But in another sense, His sight is not on us as individuals. The Lord sees the human race as a single person, and His goal is to make that person eternally happy. He's caring for the health and the happiness of the whole, and our individual wants and needs are a small part of that picture. To boil it right down, not everything that happens is about us. Not even everything that happens to us is about us. And that's a useful idea to digest, but it's also not the complete picture. And there are two important clarifications that I need to add to what I've been saying. The first is that our reading said that heaven is called the grand human, and we're not in heaven right now. Heaven is able to act as a unit because everyone in heaven is united by love and by a willingness to follow the Lord. It's pretty clear that people on earth are not always willing to act as a unit. It's love that unites and hatred that divides, and there are people who choose hatred. So the greater whole that we're invited to be a part of is not the human race as it exists on earth. We're not expected or required to feel at one with everyone on this planet. The grand human is heaven. And people on earth are part of that greater whole to the degree that they have heaven within themselves. And if we choose to reject heaven, then we choose to associate ourselves with hell. And you can think of hell as the shadow of the grand human. What we're actually taught in the heavenly doctrines of the new church is that hell is everything that hurts and distorts the grand human. We read, those who are governed by self-love and love of the world are outside the grand human. Indeed, they are in hell. They do not correspond to the organs or members of the body, but to various defects and diseases introduced into them. So those people who don't choose to be a part of something greater than themselves are choosing to be something that's like a disease. And in this world, we're free to choose good or evil, which means that in this world, the grand human and its diseases exist side by side. In the next life, they're separated. The true grand human, which is heaven, is eternally ever more alive and stronger. And everyone who would bring disease or evil into that body is kept apart in hell. So in one sense, all of us, good and evil alike, are part of a single whole. Just like a body and a disease that's in that body are sort of a part of a single whole. Yet in a truer sense, good and evil are totally distinct. And a disease in a body is not that body. The disease preys on the body. We get to choose which of the two will be, and we're not really a part of a greater whole until we choose to act like it. The second important clarification has to do with the idea that the Lord still sees us as individuals, even while He's caring for the human race as one human being. Being God, He sees the greatest possible good. He sees what will bring the most happiness to the most people, and that's what He's leading us towards. But, being God, He also sees the least tiny details. And the fact that He's leading us as a whole towards good things that we can't even comprehend does not have to mean that our individual lives are unimportant to Him. On the contrary, even in the smallest moments of our lives, He is immediately present with every last one of us, seeing us as His beloved children. He says, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 copper coins, and not one of them is forgotten before God? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows." The hairs of your head are all numbered. You could say that God has a plan for every hair on your head. Without a doubt, He has a plan for you. He sees the big picture, but He never for a moment loses sight of the little things. In fact, we're told that the Lord has total and perfect control of the universe because every last detail is in His hands. And if the details were out of His control, would He really be in charge? One good way to start to get a sense of what it means to be God is to contemplate the fact that He is able to give His whole heart and all of His attention to every single human being at once. And at the same time, He's leading and guiding all of us as one. I want to go back to talking about the implications of this. If the human race is meant to be one human being, one of the most obvious implications of that is that we're a lot more interconnected than we tend to think we are. We all know that our decisions affect other people. We know that unnecessary rudeness from a stranger can cast a shadow over us that lingers for a long time. And we know that unexpected warmth from a stranger can lighten our whole mood. Our decisions affect other people in ways that go beyond what we really see or intend. So someone who hurts somebody because they were driving drunk probably didn't intend that injury, but they did choose to take an irresponsible risk, and that choice held more within it than perhaps they understood. Poor choices like that ripple through the world, though we wish they wouldn't. And the pandemic that's happening right now is actually a really good example of this. I said before that disease is a reflection of evil. It's an illustration or a representation of the behavior of evil. And the New Church teaches that everything that happens in this physical world comes from or is caused by something in the spiritual world. So this pandemic that we're witnessing is somehow a reflection of something that's going on in the spirit of the human race. And that doesn't mean that the people who get sick are the bad ones or the ones who are doing whatever it is that's wrong. That's not how it works. God never gives us a sickness to punish us for our transgressions. The sickness belongs to the whole body, to the human race, and not to any individuals. And yet, it's individual people who are affected by it. It's individual people who get sick. In a way, this feels terribly unfair. Why are any of us ever affected by someone else's poor decisions? Why is that allowed to happen? The answer is that the Lord gives people freedom to choose what they choose. And if those choices didn't affect anything, if they didn't have an impact, well, then they'd be meaningless, and that freedom to choose would be an illusion. But it's more useful to look at all of this the other way around. Our choices affect other people. And yes, that means that our responsibility to keep bad stuff out of the system is something that we need to take pretty seriously. But it also means that the good we do ripples through the world in ways that go beyond what we see. The love we share affects far more than the immediate people we share it with. And the spiritual work we do, the hard work of repentance that no one ever witnesses, that work affects the world in ways that go far, far beyond what we see. Every little bit of evil that we take out of the system makes the whole system that much healthier. We are not silos. Our spirits are all interconnected, and the love that the Lord wants to bring into the world through us will touch other people. If we work with Him to heal our own spirits, we're doing our small part to bring healing to the spirit of the human race. And in that work, we are never alone. Every human being throughout the planet who chooses to put their neighbor ahead of themselves is on our side. And heaven, the whole of heaven, is on our side and present in our work. When we do heaven's work, we become part of a body so much bigger than our own, and we share in its strength. And the Lord, our God, is looking into the face of that grand human and smiling at His bride. All of us are invited to be a part of that greater whole. He's saving a place for each of us. And the Spirit and the bride say, "Come." And let him who hears say, "Come." Amen.